welcome back those of you who've been with us already. If you haven't, this is part of the ReSIG Day, which is why I'm introducing it, which is the coordinator of the ReSIG. Katie Moran.
Hello. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me and having, or giving me the opportunity to share my first ever exploratory or action research. Okay, the exploratory research looks actually into how to help the students improve their oral presentation skills. Right, so I'm going to start off, basically I've split the presentation up into 4 parts. The situation, the first group, second group, and conclusion. I'll talk to you about the first group and the second group because I actually did 2 cycles of the research. So I'm going to start off by giving you a bit of information about my teaching context. I work in a school, an engineering school called EFRE, which is situated in the Paris area in France. It's a grande école with approximately 1,200 students. I'm the head of language programs, and the students do compulsory English courses, and within those compulsory English courses, they do compulsory oral presentations, generally 15 minutes, generally in pairs. This action research presentation, this project, refers to 2 different classes. One class which is an undergraduate class, and the class is based on intercultural, cross-cultural understanding, and the graduate class, which is a class about technologies and creativity. Both classes are C1 language level, which is sort of upper intermediate, for those of you who are not familiar with the, this framework. Okay, so what was my puzzle? What was my problem? Now, I've had the luck to work at this school since 2000, since the year 2000. And when I first got this job, I was amazed at the quality of the oral presentations. They were so good, the students were so dedicated, the content was rich, it was really interesting. But for the last 3 or 4 years, myself and my colleagues have noticed that the presentations are just a nightmare. The students seem to be sort of preparing really at the last minute. I felt as if the students were literally copying and pasting information from Wikipedia onto a piece of paper and reading it. It appeared that any instructions that I gave the students, they weren't taking into account. They didn't seem to be taking into account my instructions or feedback whatsoever. And basically, I felt as if the students were just, yeah, another presentation, okay, hey, can I borrow your PowerPoint slides type thing. So this was my predicament, and within this predicament, the feeling that the quality of the students' presentations had really dropped, I had the opportunity to attend a workshop which was facilitated by Dr. Richard Smith from the University of Warwick and Divya Madhavan, who's also Brochier, who's at the École Centrale de Paris and also Exeter University. And this was a morning session, a 3-hour session, and I learnt about exploratory research and action research. And I thought, oh, goodness, thank you. This is the opportunity for me to try and gain an understanding into the situation of the oral presentations for my students and to see if I can, maybe even try to improve the situation. So, what did I do? Basically, the procedure that I'm going to explain now is the same procedure for the 2 cycles. So listen carefully, because you'll need to remember it. And it's important to know that I kept a log throughout. Now, when I say log, I'm a busy teacher, and I'm very lucky to have a young family. Okay, so it wasn't as consistent as it might have been. Basically, I took notes. Took notes regularly, and also one thing I did was I wrote regular reports which I sent to Richard, and that was really helpful as well. First thing was to see if the students were interested in participating, because with this type of project you really need your students on board. So I explained to my students that I'm a teacher who's always trying to improve herself, and basically I'd noticed that the quality of the presentations had dropped. Also I pointed out that they had to do presentations anyway. So we could use this opportunity to have the best experience for them and for me. They had to do it anyway, so we might as well make the best of it. They completely adhered to the project. They completely wanted to do it. So I set up a free write. Now, what I did is on the board, because we have chalkboards even though we're an engineering school, I wrote some keywords associated with oral presentation, so preparation, audience, feedback, and also the question, do I find oral presentations valuable? And then I said, okay, you've got 45 minutes. 45 minutes, I want to listen to you. This is your opportunity to express yourself. Write down everything that you like about presentations, that you don't like. In fact, you can write anything that you want. You can use this question as a starting point. If you want to write in French, you can write in French. If you want to write in English, you can write in English. Go for it. They completely were captivated. As you can see, I took this photo on the slide, but I did ask them afterwards if I could use it. They really took the opportunity to express themselves. And that week, I took the time to read the feedback, and I looked for, it was so rich, I thought, this could be interesting to sort of share with them. So I looked for themes that reoccurred regularly, and I wrote them up, and then I made a transparency. And the next week, I asked the students if they were interested in finding, in learning about the findings, and they said yes. So I disseminated the findings, and that's me. And the students were a really captivated audience. They were interested in finding out how I portrayed what they had said, how I had portrayed what they had said in French and English, so they could learn the new words, and also what the other students had said. And to build on this enthusiasm, I said, okay, through this, we've basically managed to identify key points, important things that you think are important for oral presentation skills, for oral presentations. Shall we do a class project which makes sure that all of the presentations we listen to meet these objectives? Shall we work together? They wanted to, so we did it. So I put them into groups of 3, asked them to, for each point, try to think of an improvement strategy, a practical way that we could make sure that the rest of the class actually managed to do the best presentation possible. We did a plan of action. We put together a schedule because obviously you've only got a certain amount of classes. We did the project, we listened to the presentations. At the end, we did a final free write. So again, the students would have the possibility to express themselves, reflect on the experience for them, reflect on the quality of their presentations, and write anything else they wanted to. And because we're in France, we decided to have a goûter, some snack party at the end to celebrate. Now, those of you who attended yesterday, I had the opportunity to talk about all the different learning strategies that came out of the first cycle. I can't talk about them all today because I've only got half an hour, but some of the really interesting ones that the students came up with. And it's really interesting because every strategy had a pedagogical rationale that the students came up with. So, for example, they said, according to them, the more autonomy we have for our presentation, the more freedom, the more creativity, the better the quality of the presentation because we're more invested. Now, because the first cycle, the course was on intercultural awareness, they said, we want to do any take on culture at all, any take. If we want to do a talk on a particular culture, I don't know, how technology impacts culture, the culture of mangas, we can do anything we want. Fine, go for it. Another interesting thing they said was that, honestly, Madame Moran, we don't understand how the teachers mark, what they're looking for. Honestly, we don't know. And I said, listen, well, what we could do is we could work together. We could have a class project. So you help me, or I help you, establish the grading criteria. So what I did is I put 4 big sheets of paper, they're called butcher paper in America, butcher paper around the room, and I wrote headings, so content, structure, delivery, and language. Put the students into groups and said, okay, imagine you are evaluating your friends' presentations. What criteria would you look for under the theme of contents? What criteria would you look for under the theme of language? As you can see, they worked really hard. writing down notes. After 5 minutes, okay, change posters. So they changed posters, which enabled them to read, the students to read what the other groups had come up with and then add new ideas. They did that again. And then finally, I centralised all the ideas. Can't see it very well. But so basically, under language, content, structure and delivery, so for example, under contents, we had, for example, critical thinking, and and then we decided how many points we would award for each category. So this was interesting as well because the students could decide in what the main focus of the presentation should be. Another interesting thing that came out was the students said, oh God, sometimes it's so awful to do a presentation and the audience isn't actively listening. I'm pleased that this isn't the case today. So they decided that one thing that we could do to avoid this would have peer evaluation. So what we did is we decided, again, we, collegially, democratically, decided that we would use a reduced version of the class evaluation grid with a space for questions. And as each student was doing their presentation, the students would make notes. And that worked really well. Other ideas, for example, the student said, we never have time to do preparation outside of class time because the presentations always fall during the exam period. So we need in-class preparation time. But it's their project. If they want in-class preparation time, I have to give it to them. It's give and take. They also said that they wanted to do presentations which put them in a professional context as much as possible. So they wanted to wear professional clothes, and they wanted me to take a photo of them. They look very smart, I think you'll agree. Then finally, at the end, after the presentations, we did the final free write. Same process. I read it at home, looked for themes that occurred repeatedly. And the key findings, the students themselves, in their opinion, they had done better presentations. They loved the project approach, working together democratically. They thought it had a positive impact on their relationships with each other and with me. They stopped asking me if I knew what Facebook was, etc. They talked about the project limitations. For example, they thought it was ill-timed, that the project did coincide with the exams, so it wasn't ideal. And they absolutely thought the presentation should be continued. Now, I've selected 5 little quotes, so if you bear with me, I'll quote the students. They have, as I say, given me permission for this. First student, in sum, despite my initial scepticism regarding the project, I didn't think anything original would come out of it. I was surprised by how seriously the project was undertaken. I noticed that I was more implicated in my presentation and that the atmosphere of the class became more intellectual and fun. Second student, the free write about presentations made us realise that we believe doing presentations is important. Learner awareness. Student number 3, don't worry, there's only 5. Student number 3, I found the first free write interesting to write, but most of all to read. The fact that you showed us back what we wrote was very funny. We could see what each of us said and the points a lot of us did mention. We could see the lesson from a different point of view, not like a student, but more like an analyst. 4. First, I was surprised the first time you asked us to do some free writing to understand what was wrong with the fall of the quality of our presentations and the bad grades. I think I'm not the only one to think that it's the first time a teacher wants to engage in a sincere discussion with us about the problems and what we need and want the course to be. I think other teachers should learn about what you did in other classes too. Many teachers say, I don't know what you're doing wrong, but there's a problem. I've never seen that before. Then they continue their course in the same way, and they don't really care about what's wrong. Last, maybe it won't work every year with every class, but for us, this class project has been very beneficial and interesting. In my opinion, the biggest obstacle in the future will be to motivate students to participate seriously. which I thought was interesting compared to the conversations that we had this morning about the obstacle of motivating the teachers. So the students think the students are the problem. Okay, so from a personal level, so that's the students' voices, they're the students' voices. From a personal level, for me it was a breath of fresh air to be reminded that the students come to the classroom as highly creative, intelligent, thinking individuals with their own experiences and their own expectations. You know this, but you need reminding sometimes. It was great to get the students' perspectives, to watch the students take ownership of a task that they considered, quite frankly, boring and monotonous. Treating the students as learning partners, being sincere, self-criticism, watching them equally be sincere and self-critical. Feeling really as if I was a project facilitator of a student-learned project, a student-centred approach project, and better presentations. But between you and me, the presentations still did lack critical thinking. They'd got the look right, the structure right, but there weren't sometimes the critical thinking wasn't there. As I said, the students noticed as well it was ill-timed, and a question that kept coming up in my head was this like a success just because of beginner's luck, because I was motivated and stimulated by the research, or could it work again? So I decided to do it again. Remember, same research procedure, free write analysis, group project, schedule, final free write. One thing that was really interesting is the students really appreciated being part of an ongoing, continuous, organic project. They were really interested to know what the students in the first cycle had come up with, and they borrowed quite a few strategies. Some of the strategies they borrowed just plain and simple. For example, the idea of a free subject. Theirs was creativity and technology, the theme of the course, so again they could have any presentation topic on these themes, but they wanted freedom. Sometimes they borrowed the strategies but adapted. Sometimes they borrowed the strategies but had different objectives, different reasons. For example, the second cycle, some of the students said they didn't feel it was fair when they felt sometimes that some groups worked hard for their presentations and prepared a lot. Some students did hardly anything, and at the end of the day, the teachers gave them more or less the same grade. So they wanted to engage in peer evaluation to be able to have some sort of influence on the teacher. So again, same thing, peer evaluation. First cycle to encourage active listening. Second cycle to make sure there's some sort of quality control as far as the grading from the teacher was concerned. The second cycle also came up with new strategies, innovative ways to ensure critical thinking. One that I have to share with you, they decided that each group would have to do a 2-minute pitch 2 weeks before the presentation date, because this would prevent last-minute preparation, and it would give the rest of the class the possibility to decide whether the topic was interesting and whether there was potential scope for critical thinking. So, at the end of the 2-minute talk, the rest of the class, we used a thermometer to validate or not. So it was thumbs up or thumbs down. And if it was not quite sure, we had to come up with suggestions and tips to try and ensure that the presentation would be sufficiently rich. So as I said, like the first cycle was lacking in critical thinking. Again, one strategy that was reused was having, in the first cycle, in the evaluation breakdown, the students had awarded 25% to content. In the second cycle, they awarded 50% to content. So that was quite interesting. So they wanted to have really rich presentations, and they decided to let this be reflected in the distribution of marks. There are lots of factors we could take into account, like this was a course as opposed to an undergraduate course. But it was interesting that they decided to do it like this. So a key thing that sort of struck me in the second cycle was the fact that we really have an upward spiral nature of action research. The fact that we had a problem, we did a cycle, we found solutions. We analysed the solutions, I shared it with different students. They took into account, they built on that project, they found that they adapted to meet their own needs, and they found new solutions to push the project even further, to improve the presentations even further, to improve the presentations and the learning experience. Okay, now I have to just be careful about time. Okay, now I have to just quickly confess I had a blip, I had a mishap. Second procedure, I was presenting the initial free write, second procedure, initial free write. I realised, God, I made a transparency of the penultimate, or basically my first draft of the free write analysis. I did my best to synthesise and, you know, explain to the students as best as I could, but it wasn't brilliant. And as the class project continued, I felt as if the project didn't really have a direction, that the ideas they came up with were superficial, especially compared to the last groups. And I questioned myself thinking, God, did I really do a bad job? You know. And luckily, because action research is quite flexible, I thought, okay, I'll re-present the final findings, I'll reformulate the objectives, and we'll see if, you know, it kickstarts the project, and it did. What interests me for a potential third cycle is what happens if I hadn't have intervened? What happens if I hadn't have represented the problem and made sure that they had understood? Maybe that's just common sense that teachers should do that. So I'm not sure if that's really an issue. But it was quite interesting. I think the role of the teacher in action research is quite interesting. How much influence do we have? For example, the fact that the second cycle made sure that they had strategies to ensure critical thinking. Was that because I had said, oh, last group was really good, but no critical thinking? So how much had my role in setting up the project influenced the outcome? One thing as well that the students really, really appreciated was the written feedback. In the second cycle, the students wanted to have a written trace of the feedback. So what I ended up doing is, because I had all the peer evaluations, I took all the peer evaluations home, I had my feedback, I typed it up, I don't recommend that, it takes ages, and I gave it to them at the end, and they really, really appreciated the feedback. One student said, after a presentation, feedback helps a lot. I really like the feedback from the teacher, but also from the other students. They are the most difficult people in the class to keep focus. It's rare to have written feedback. It made the presentation more useful than just a grade, and the presentation and the feedback could be useful in the future. I think that's something very interesting to look at and think about for future cycles, our role of a language expert. What can we bring to the students to help them really get the most out of this learning experience, and how can we give them the language expertise? How can we share the language expertise that we have so they come out of the experience with hopefully better English? And it's really good experience, like professionally, because it means if you have a project, an ongoing project, it means that when you're going to conferences and stuff, you think, ooh, that could be cool to try out with my project. I can't wait to share this idea with my students. If my students think it could work, we could try it out. But we could try it out together with my students on board. So I think that's a really interesting thing. Because I live in France, appetizer, des appétiseurs, so basically an aperitif. These are ideas that I maybe think about for a third cycle. I'm not 100% sure, but I would really like to look at the role of the teacher as a project facilitator. I had the opportunity to, I really don't have the chance to go into this now, but I've got ideas of different theories, groundbreaking theories in the teaching language world. Here I'd like to experiment with an electronic pen which allows you to make like PDF feedback sheets that I could email to my students and I wouldn't have to type them up. I'm also thinking about the idea of doing a collaborative project with my colleagues if they're interested, and also even with my Spanish, Chinese, Japanese, German, and Spanish colleagues, because it could be interesting to do something on not just English. Okay, so they're ideas. Thank you for your attention, and a special thanks to Bonnie Tsai, who is my IATEFL mentor, and to Divier Brochet and Richard Smith, because I would have never done this without them. Do you have any questions? Yes?
As a matter of fact, I want to ask about the timetable of this whole project. How long did it take?
It's a very good question. Each course is 15 weeks. To be honest, because I had so much stuff to do, I didn't get started until about week 7. So the whole thing went over 7 weeks, but if possible, it would be best to have longer.
When you said that you usually ask the students to go for peer review, you distributed rubrics for them to evaluate their fellows. Did you collect these rubrics back and have a look at them, or you just left it for the students?
No, what I did is after each presentation, I gave an oral feedback, my feedback, so complete oral feedback. Then I opened the floor so the other students could give feedback, and I collected them in as well.
Did you have to go over the rubrics given to the students?
No, we used the rubrics that came out in the evaluation grid.
When you said that you make the students go for a free subject, they have to choose their own subjects, the topic. Does it have to relate to the themes? Because
Yeah.
you said that English is compulsory, and they had to go for the themes given by the book.
No, we don't have a book. The only condition was that the presentation related to the theme of the course some way.
Okay.
Some way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes?
Yes, thank you so much. I have 2 questions. The first question is, I'd like just a few or background information about the participants, the environment. I mean, you said that they are French, they study English.
No, they study, sorry, I should have said that. They're an engineering, it's an engineering school, so they're studying for a computer science degree. And they do compulsory English classes within that context.
You said that they have breakdown in, or maybe they are suffering problems from communicating or from making presentations. So is this problem related to the language? Maybe they don't have the language.
No, they do have the language.
Maybe second or foreign language. Or maybe there is a problem with the content. They don't have a content to share or to present. So what kind of problems that do participants have?
Before the project or after the project?
No, before the project.
Why did I want to do the project? Is that the question? Why were the presentations bad initially?
You said that there is a problem. The statements of the problem that students cannot present, or as you said that they make a copy and paste.
They made copy and paste. They just read the presentation. They were prepared at the last minute. They were very descriptive, not analytical enough. There was no signposting,
So
often no conclusion, often no
It's
introduction.
related here to the content, not to the language.
Everything. But you're right, it was more focusing on the content and the structure as opposed to the language itself. So it's a good point.
Yeah. So, the final question is that, as you said, that there is an improvement of students' oral presentation because of the strategies that you have followed by the way of action research. I mean, you will be able to convert this improvement into a quantitative data? Because it is just like an observation. How can we know that this improvement is statistically significant?
We can't. I'm not sure we can. The only thing we could do is compare the grades they got last semester and the grades they got the semester at the end of the presentation, at the end of the experience.
Yeah.
But I wasn't trying to be statistically relevant.
Not quantitative.
Huh?
Not quantitative.
It was not quantitative, no.
Probably you could see the enthusiasm.
Is it qualitative?
You could see that the cut and paste was no longer there.
For me, there's no difference. I mean, if you look at the evaluations that I did before and the evaluations I did after, it's day and night. Like the students did better presentations.
See, another point is that we are focusing on the language, how students can speak the language fluently. No matter about the content, because the content is just related to the students. Maybe they are not prepared, or maybe they are lazy, they don't want to study, maybe they were not well motivated just to look or search, and then after that to prepare content. But I mean, as a language teachers, we are focusing on how students can produce a language, how students can communicate effectively, I mean, in a situation, or maybe in an environment. So here, as I said, or as I understand that, the most problematic students face is that maybe they cannot search, or maybe they do not study well, or can prepare a content for their subject matter very well. Is that right?
Not really. It's basically, we're teaching them language, but being able to be operational in English in a professional context. So they have to be able to give presentations in English. So that was the idea of trying to help them prepare that. There's 1 more minute, sorry.
Can I say something? It seems to me, and this is connected to what you're saying and what you said before, that this was really successful, but not because the focus was on the language only. This is much more than language. This is about learning, this is about life.
It went beyond language.
Exactly.
But it did include language.
Of course, yes. But,
And also the feedback sheets I gave them were very detailed in terms of language. But that's something that that's something, if I did a third time, I'll speak to you afterwards.
Thank you very much.